This presentation was published as part of the Open Educational Resources Archive by InclusiveGameLab. InclusiveGameLab is a project that was funded by the German Ministry of Research, Technology and Space and realized by the University of Applied Sciences Cologne and the Department for Youth Media Culture, North Rhine-Westphalia. Today we are going to talk about event accessibility. If we want gaming to be inclusive, we can't stop at our products. We also need to ensure that everyone can access public gaming spaces so they're able to connect with like-minded people, check out the newest releases, and potentially to find ways to start or accelerate their career. So let's have a look at the many ways we can make events more accessible. Now, the challenges and opportunities differ for in-person, online, and hybrid events. For in-person events, the important first step is to carefully choose a location, starting with the country. Some countries may be less accessible or even completely inaccessible to some people, whether it's because of travel restrictions, local laws, or inadequate infrastructure. Travel restrictions affect many people from around the world, and especially citizens from African and Arab countries. They may have to acquire visas, or they are prohibited from entering a country altogether. Local laws may not necessarily create legal barriers to enter countries, but they can create dangerous conditions for people, for example, due to their gender identity, sexuality, or religion. Local infrastructure, on the other hand, can cause environmental barriers, especially for mobility-impaired people. Are the public spaces in a country generally more or less wheelchair accessible? Does it have public transportation, at least in larger cities, as well as a good road network? And finally, how expensive are the country and the city you're considering for your event? As we explained in previous talks, people with disabilities often face higher costs while earning less money. So this aspect is very important to consider too. Next, pick a venue that is accessible both in terms of the building itself and the surrounding area. Is there a parking lot close by? Does the nearest train station have at least one accessible elevator? And is it working properly? Are the sidewalks wheelchair friendly? And are there accessible toilets available both on the way and on site? There should be no mandatory steps or escalators, but elevators that can fit all wheelchairs, including power chairs. All doors need to be wide enough for these types of wheelchairs too, and as does the space between booths. The same applies to emergency exits. To make sure that a venue fulfills all these criteria, visit it in person to evaluate its accessibility, ideally with an accessibility consultant. Once you've picked a place for your event, it's time to plan the details. Access to the building is not enough. As an event organizer, you need to make sure that attendees can move around freely and enjoy as much of the event program as possible. Make sure that attendees using wheelchairs, wide canes or guide dogs have enough space between booths, aisles and tables to navigate the venue. Use flooring that allows for easy use of wheelchairs, so no thick carpets. Do not provide standing-only booths. Have at least a few desks with seating options and height-adjustable tables to accommodate wheelchair users. Ask exhibitors to have a selection of assisted technology ready or provide it yourself. If there are elevated stages in the event space, make sure that there are ramps with railings for attendees and speakers using wheelchairs. Next, standing in line for hours is not just annoying for most, it's impossible for some. And that's especially true for players with motor and mobility impairments, people with chronic fatigue, as well as players who experience sensory overload. One way to solve the waiting line issue are virtual queues. Instead of requiring people to be physically present, consider offering them the option to sign up for a time slot online. This way, you exclude fewer players, you'll make sure they're still able to focus and appreciate your game, and you won't have to deal with the task of managing big crowds at the booths. Offer information about games upfront, for example by setting up signs outside of the booth or at the end of the queue with key facts, or maybe a QR code linking to a detailed fact sheet. This is important because it allows players to understand if they can even play your game before waiting in line. Make sure demos offer at least some accessibility options if they are planned for the full release. Even if they don't work perfectly yet, you'll show potential customers that you care about them and that they can expect a playable product once it's finished. By contrast, if you don't have any of these options on display yet, players with impairments will likely think that your game is just not accessible to them and move on, so you will lose customers. If possible, have the most important accessibility options on by default, so players don't have to ask or search for them. This includes subtitles, large text, and screen reader support. Don't rush players to finish the demo, but plan ahead and give them enough time to play. This is particularly important if people first have to go through a lengthy setup process to ensure accessibility. If you're offering virtual queues, consider allowing people to book extended time slots for this purpose. Now, whether you're organizing an event or just participating in one, do your best to reduce noise. Any person who has ever been to an event like Gamescom or E3 will be familiar with the cacophony of sounds that causes headaches and fatigues to everyone after a while. But these same stimuli can cause harm more quickly and severely to people with certain impairments. It's not helpful to compete with other exhibitors by increasing the noise level. Try to find other ways to attract the audience, like for example with a well-designed booth, comfortable seats, or an interesting product. If you can't change the sound levels, either at the event in general or your booth in particular, at the very least offer free earplugs. And whether you're in a loud environment or not, always provide good headphones to your players so they can focus better on your game. This is especially important if they're visually impaired or hard of hearing. Quiet spaces are dedicated rooms people can access if they need to remove themselves from the hustle and bustle of an event. While such rooms will likely be welcomed by able-bodied attendees as well, they are particularly important for those who experience overstimulation or, for example, social anxiety. Quiet spaces should be as far away as possible from loud areas, but at the same time easy to find and access. So put up signs to make people aware of the space and help them reach it if they ask for directions. Depending on the size of the event, there can be a single quiet room for the whole event in every hall or perhaps even at every booth. To make sure that event attendees receive the help and information they need, that they are treated with respect and feel welcome, it's crucial that you train your staff. Security personnel should be instructed to have at least one separate waiting line for people who cannot stand for a prolonged time. In addition, specify security exceptions for attendees with impairments who may need their own food, additional bags to transport medication, oxygen tanks, or other important equipment. All staff, including security, needs to be familiar with the key locations at the venue, especially elevators, quiet rooms, accessible restrooms, and of course emergency exits. Provide advice on how to and how not to treat people with impairments. For example, instruct your staff not to touch a person or their equipment unless asked, and brief them on appropriate terminology. You might also want to consider adding a properly trained awareness team to your staff, which can be approached anytime by anyone if they feel uncomfortable or unsafe. The members of this team should be clearly identifiable, for example, by wearing uniform clothing with bright colors and large labels. Booth staff, meanwhile, should be aware of all accessibility accommodations at their booth and in the game they are promoting. Offer free tickets or so-called medical passes to assistance of impaired attendees. This is important to lower access barriers because otherwise attending your event may be prohibitively expensive for some people. Infections can be very dangerous, especially for people with certain chronic illnesses, so do your best to protect them. Kindly ask event attendees to follow this protocol too, which may include staying at home if they are feeling sick, taking a COVID test prior to the event, and wearing a mask on site. Consider offering free tests and masks at the venue, and input devices at the booth should be cleaned after every use or optional disinfectants provided to the players. If you offer food and drinks at the venue, make sure that catering and snack bars are accessible as well. So provide tables with different heights for the buffet and for the dining area. Have menu cards with large print or braille, which provide detailed information about the food's ingredients. And try to account for a range of dietary restrictions. If yours is an RSVP event, give your guests the opportunity to specify such restrictions and plan the catering accordingly. Now, the next points are relevant not just for on-site events, but also for online events. All of your communication should be as accessible as possible, so use language that is easy to understand, add alt text to images, and convey information through different channels. Make sure that every ad gets the most important information across, which includes the date or dates, time or times, the location, the ticket price, and the most important accessibility accommodations. Once you start advertising, have the program and venue map ready in an accessible format so attendees can familiarize themselves with key information before the event. Provide a full list of accessibility accommodations and the contact information of someone players can reach out to with questions. You can make registrations mandatory or optional depending on the type and the size of your event. Pre-event registrations have an important advantage. You can use them to ask attendees for additional accommodations, for example, sign language interpreters, live captioning, on-site assistance, or braille on signs and printouts. While you should have as many of these accommodations as possible by default, you may not be able to do that due to budget restrictions. In this case, collecting information about actual accessibility requirements can be a good approach. However, keep in mind that many of these accommodations take time to plan, so communicate a deadline that gives you enough time. Ensure that the registration forms are easy to understand, screen reader compatible, and easy to navigate with a range of different devices. Next, we're going to talk about online events. Online events were very common during the COVID pandemic, but unfortunately they are not offered as often anymore outside of publisher showcases. They have many advantages though. They are usually less expensive because you don't have to rent a venue, you don't need to hire as much staff, and you don't need catering. They may also be easier to organize for the same reasons. And most importantly, online events are much more accessible for most people because they can join from home. They don't have to travel and potentially face environmental barriers, and they save money. They may also be able to follow the program more relaxed in their own time if talks and presentations are recorded. Choose a suitable platform for the stream and for networking, respectively. Both platforms should be accessible and easy to use. Embedded chats, such as the Zoom live chat, are not suitable for this purpose because conversations are very difficult to follow, especially when you're addressing a larger audience. Instead, choose a tool that allows you to structure the conversations, for example, by providing a separate channel for each topic or session. Hire trained moderation staff that enforces community rules or safer space policies that you've previously shared with all attendees. For online events, you should offer at the very least live captions for all content, whether it's a talk, a panel, or a hosted trailer show. In addition, sign language interpretations are highly recommended for lowering access barriers, and you can ask developers to provide trailers with audio descriptions or create these descriptions yourself. These accommodations, by the way, may not only be important for your audience, but also for speakers. And to ensure that you don't exclude professionals with impairments, consider allowing them to submit pre-recorded talks. These talks can be streamed just as any live presentation, but make things significantly easier for experts who, for example, struggle with speaking for a longer time, whose condition may change from day to day, or who face anxiety-related challenges. Plan enough breaks between sessions so people have time to get away from their computers or focus on networking. Lastly, hybrid events are a great option if it's important to you to bring people together on site, but at the same time reduce access barriers by offering a stream. Depending on the size of the event, this is likely the most expensive option that needs the most planning because you have to make sure to consider as many guidelines as possible for both on-site and online events. It may also be tricky to ensure that on-site and online attendees have a similar experience, at least in terms of the quality. So you should discuss well in advance which are the most important features of your event and how to translate them into online space. A great example for this particular model is the Game Accessibility Conference, or GA-Conf. In recent years, every edition of this conference has taken place both on-site and online, with Discord being the platform of choice for online communication. On the conference server, attendees can find a dedicated channel for each talk, so they can have lively discussions about certain topics without distracting from others. In addition, there are also a number of channels for chatting, discussing higher-level topics, or even sharing photos of your pets. Talks are both streamed live and recorded, and speakers are allowed to submit pre-recorded presentations. While the Discord server sees most activity during conference days, of course, the community continues to share accessibility-related news and discuss ideas between events. So GA-Conf shows that when done right, hybrid events can lower more access barriers and bring people from all over the world together.